All right, hey guys, Sam here with you on Friday, October 19th. It's kind of early afternoon. And I was kind of went back and forth here. There's not a lot that I can add here that relates to the current price of Bitcoin. So I thought I would try something different today. Now this is something you certainly can apply it to cryptocurrency. You can apply it to, it was taught to me in the Forex market. So I thought I would share it here, and it'd be something that you can experiment with a little bit over the weekend. There are those that believe there's an algorithm tied to it. Before we draw that conclusion, I'm going to show it to you and give you the idea behind it, and let you work through some charts and see if you find it useful to you. So it's something we haven't really looked at here in the past. So with nothing really to contribute here, I thought this would at least make a video here that you could get some value out of. So sitting here looking at Bitcoin here on the 60-minute on GDAX. Maybe there's a kick here. Maybe we're going to get this push. It's not unusual to find some volatility over the weekends, but right now this is looking kind of saggy. We're sitting right back in this range that we're in. So maybe we get something like that, but that remains to be seen. So what I'm going to try and do is just do something different here and show you this trading technique. It was taught to me in Forex. It's very effective in Forex. Ideally suited to shorter term. So I would tell you 60-minute and below, although you'll find it's effective on higher time frames as well. But let me just give you the basic premise of this. So here's the idea. If we can identify a technical pivot and we get the market, well, let's say we're coming down this direction. So let's say we had something like this that we were leading into. All right, so the market has come down for whatever reason we've identified. Maybe it's an algo play, maybe it's an algo target. We've got maybe it's a 50 or 618. We've got a technical pivot. All right, so the way that this methodology works, it's a channeling, for lack of a better way to describe it. It's based off of some of Gann's work. So the idea is we're going to take this technical pivot here. And as we don't have anything to forecast from with regards to any future price action, we have to start with the last swing, the last dominant swing on the time frame that you're working in. So if I take that pivot low and I go back to this pivot high here, right? So here's the way it works. So this is the swing that we're working from. Now we're trying to project as to where we're going to find a reaction. So the target is 100%. So we'd be taking this swing and essentially just doubling it, right? But you'll also find that there'll be reactions at the 50s. So here's the swing high here. Here's 50%, here's 100%, 150, and then we continue to go 200. We could put the 250 in there and the 300, but these would be absolute extremes before you saw a reaction. The one that we're looking for and we're anticipating is around the 100. Now, there are times when it's not precise. So it was taught to me to have a little bit of a cushion around it. So you might have something on this in Bitcoin. You might have, what we got there from, you might have a $15 range on, or a 15 tick range around that, looking for a reaction. So the anticipation, let's see, I'm going to do it this way. So if we're going to go towards this, then we're going to anticipate a reaction there. That would create another technical pivot. So if the market starts moving down, we'll use, let's see. So let me see, do it this way. Let's see if I can try not to confuse you. So if the market starts moving down, we would redraw it because we have a technical pivot here going back the other way. So it's going to be easier when I show it to you. But if you look here, and let me just clear this up. If you look at what we're actually doing, we're just dividing the market in quarters and halves, right? That's all we're doing. So here's 100, 200, 300. So let me show you as it applies to the market, and then we'll go through it again. I'll see if it's useful to you. All right, so again, it was taught to me in Forex, but it's just as good here. So I'm trying to stay away from this pivot because this is, it was an anomaly. It's not the typical due course of trading. So we have an event, let's call it that. We have an event here that distorts the market. Interesting low, though it goes right to the median line. So I'm just looking for some space over here. So this ought to work here. So let me open this up a little bit. So we'll start here on the 60 minutes. So here's a pivot that we can work from. So here's the idea behind it. If we're going to channel now, starting off, I'm going to use just the first little squiggle that I have to work with here. All right, so let me open this up. There's two ways to apply it. First is I'm working to the last squiggle here. So you see, if I open this up so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so here's the last, before we started down, here's the last hesitation. Here's 100%. Now, we don't quite make 100. We ultimately get there and we get to the 150. But as the market starts moving away and we go beyond this pivot, now we want to start forecasting from the next pivot before we see a swing, which would be right here. Okay, so if draw this here, well, maybe this is easier to use. So we come back, we go again. Right, now we have a new high to work with. All right, so we're going to continue to draw up here. All right, so now this is a swing that I have to work with. Now again, note here, I've cut everything in half. So here's the range from white line to white line. Here's 50% of that range. Here's the negative 50 or 150 of it. Here would be, if you're thinking of it in terms of, well, let's see, let me show it to you this way. So if you think here, if we take the length of this swing and then we project it from this low here, right, here would be essentially 200% of it. Here's 100%. Here's 200%. Right, so you get the idea. If the language that I'm using, this would be 100% of the swing. Here, this would be the negative 100. So let's see how it goes. So we stay here. We hold the 50. Now we ultimately get here. We get, oh, look at that. Right to the negative 100 to the tick. Now you think, all right, well, that just seems like something you went and cherry picked, and it was I did not cherry pick that. I promise you I didn't. But note here. So it's swing low. So all we've done is take this swing low to this swing high, and we're projecting up. And here's 100% of that. So if I take the length of this, and let's see if I can show it to you this way. So if I take this swing here, and then I'm going to clone that. All right, so I've got the identical thing here, and I project from that pivot. Right, for putting it right on there. So all we've done is it's called a fib expansion is another way to think of it. So the length of this swing projected up 100%, and we get damn near, I think it is to the tick. All right, it's to the tick. So what do we have now? We have a technical pivot up here. So let's look at it coming back down. Okay, so let me clear all of this off, and it may be confusing at first. It's more of a visual thing. It's a little harder to describe it. So with that established now, so let me get this off of here. Okay, so I have a technical pivot here. So I'm going to use that same setup here in my retracement tool. The first thing I have to work with is just this little pivot right here. Right, that's all I'm doing because I don't have anything going forward. The first projection is always based on history because I don't have any data to project it forward from. All right, so as the market starts to go down, as we take out this low, right, now we have some data to project with. So I go here and I get a little bit of a swing. So I'm looking for a reaction at the 100. Right, I get a small reaction. Ultimately, we get down to the 150. So now here, it's a little bit of a judgment call. You can continue to work with this, and note here we get it to the tick. So you see what I just did there? So I just went to the next little swing low. I'm going to do the same thing here so you get the idea. I'm going to clone that, and all I'm doing is going exactly equidistant. Right? Do you see what happens here? Exactly equidistant for 100% of that swing, and I get it to the tick. To the tick here, right? And then we get a little reaction. Now, if you were thinking that was going to go up, so maybe you thought, oh, that's a place where I'd be looking for a buy, all right? So nothing's 100%. So we'd be looking here. If I'm going here, well, I've got to go all the way back here. If I'm thinking we're going up again, well, right, so you have too much history here, so we wouldn't have had anything to work with here. So if I'm going all the way up to that, that's too far. So now I'm going to go forward. Now I get a swing here. Now I have something to work with here. Well, if it takes out that low, well, if you were looking for a reaction up here, if you're looking for something on the long side, you're stopped out. Okay, so we get another pivot here. So let's work with that one. Well, actually, let's just go over one since we get a double bottom here. So I'll give you the idea again. So here, and I'm going to show you this, how to set your tool. So here's the low. right? Here's the last swing I have, right? Do you see that right? Do you see this swing right here is the last thing I have? If we go beyond that, right? So we go beyond. So now I start forecasting forward. All right, now we don't quite make it here, so I've got, well, let's get it right on there. So I've got my swing here. I don't quite make 100%. All right, so if I were in this and I'm looking for an area to be selling, I don't make 100%. So I don't have anything to work with that's technical. So I've got to wait. I've got to wait until I get a technical pivot. I can pick one here. If I just think, for whatever reason, I think, oh, I think the market is going down. So if I think this is a good pivot, I'm going to go back one. Where's the last area where I have some sort of a swing? Right, so do you see what I've done here? So here's the swing, swing to swing. I'm using the lowest low here. It's just right in there. Okay, so I'm looking for the reaction at 100%, right here. So yeah, it goes through by a couple of ticks, but that's awfully good here. So here's the swing, right? So I'm projecting. Where am I looking for the next reaction? It's at 100%, right? So here's the length of the swing. Here's 100%. Here's that swing doubled. So here's equality. Here's doubling. All right, let's go forward. Now here we have this anomaly where it gets a little trickier, but we can still forecast. So let me pull this off here. Kind of clean up the chart here. All right, so we have this. So we have a technical pivot here. Well, again, this is where it gets a little tricky because I don't have anything because we went straight down and then straight up. The first thing I've got to work with is this pivot right here. Well, look what we do. We go right to 50% of it. All right, so you might look at that and say, well, that looks like a technical pivot, so maybe I'm going here. Well, there's two ways to look at it. Either you're anticipating a reaction here, but same problem. Because of the size of that wick, I don't have anything good to work with here. The first thing I have to work with is right here. Well, what do we end up with? Well, here's 50% of that. All right, so where would 100% would put us way down here? So if we're going to duplicate that range going down, that's putting us substantially lower. So you might look at that and say, I don't think it's going that low. Right? Well, you're kind of stuck right now. You only have a couple of things to work with. You have this pivot here you can work with, and we can project forward here, right? So here's 200% to the tick, which gives the idea that this is a technical pivot. So do you see, here's 100%. It goes all the way to 200, gets through it by a tick, but now we're coming down. Right? So we don't have anything to work with coming down, so I could take this pivot, come down 100%, right? So here all I'm doing is just sitting in that range. Here would be the target. All right, but it's getting this wick is creating a problem. So let me go back. Oh, let's go back somewhere where I can just kind of randomly this kind of area. This may be good right here. Okay, so here we go. Let's use this right here. Okay, so here was a significant pivot. So if I look here now, if I take this low, and what's the last thing I've got to work with right here? Do you see the little pivot right there? That's all I've got to work with here. So I'm taking this range. Where am I looking for the reaction? Right. So remember, you got to put a little cushion. Right? As often, it was just like a front run on an algo target. Often you'll see this front run on the 100%. Now note how that comes back into play here again. So you look here and you think, okay, well, I was looking for a reaction there. So now I'm looking for, well, where's the next target on the downside? I've got a technical pivot here. Well, if I'm looking right here, that's the highest high. So if I look, the first thing I've got to work with is just this tiny little pivot right here. I don't have much to work with. Well, now we go beyond that. So I get the next low I have to work with. So we're right on it. Okay, so here... Sorry, guys. Here's my swing. So I've gone to and through. I'm getting through all of this. So I'm going to continue to just track it down. There's the next little swing pivot I have to work with. All right, again, we don't quite get there. Is it a front run? Do you see all I'm doing? I'm going from this swing high. When's the first little retrace that I get? The first little pivot that's created. Here, we're just going straight down. I get, well, at least let me open this up. So you can see I get a green candle in there. So it gives me a pivot low to work from. All right, is this the front run? Probably. All right, so let's consider this. All right, well, here's this low. All right, so the first thing I've got to work with is just this little pivot right here. Just a little pivot. Well, we go beyond. So now I can start using the forecasting component. All right, here we go. All right, so all I'm doing is taking this swing. Now you could continue to keep going forward if it continues to go. All Right? Do we get there? Well, we don't quite make 100%. Remember, there's a little, you've got to allow for some front running on this. If we're identifying this as an algorithm, well, ultimately, right, we go all the way to and through and we get past the 300%. But we'd work with different pivots. So if we're continuing to go here, all right, now we're looking at, now we got the whole thing, now we got the high here. Now I'm forecasting. So where am I going? Where am I going? Well, we get through the 100, we get to the 150 before I get my reaction. Now, again, let's pull this back here. So if you continue to go, you have the choice of continuing to pull these on the anticipation that we're going to get continued expansion. Right? We don't quite make the 150. All right. So eventually here, you're going to hit something where you're going to say, I think that's far enough. So I like this right here. So we get through it, but we get to the 150. All right. So it's a bit like the 100, 1272, 1618, where you're looking for these relationships that are part and parcel of cutting everything in half. So now if I've got a technical pivot up here and I think I'm coming down, so I've got a swing here, I'm going to project down. Well, I've got nothing to work with. I can start right here. Here's the first little pivot I get. What do we do? Here's 200% straight down. And all I'm doing is going back to the last swing. The last little pivot that I have is this little divot right here. It's all I've got. Now, if I don't want to use that and I want to project here, I could come forward this way. But we keep going. We keep going. Here's a little pivot. Keep going. Here's a little pivot. Right? Pretty close. Right? Gets through it. Right? Is that enough to start with? Well, maybe you start working with that on the way back. So if I go here, right? I don't want to go over area we've covered, but here's my pivot. I've got this little pivot right here. Right? 200% exactly. And I can say, oh no, I think it's going to continue to go. So there's the pivot. What do we get? 100%. I think it's still going to go, right? So, well, if you see 100%, you want to pay attention to that. Potentially, that's your trend change. So you'd be looking for a move down. So from here, we go from here. I've got a couple of little tiny baby little squiggles in here, but the first one that's decent is right here, right? There's the first pivot before we go up, the significant, the dominant pivot before we make that trend higher. Get it right on there. All right, so just this swing. Here's 100% of it. Here's the doubling of it. All right, with very close, right? So we've got now a pivot here. So let me get off Bitcoin. Let me just what else do I have up here? Oh, you know what I was trying to do is I was going to CoinMarketCap. I was going to look at the 3 or 4 coins with the most volume. So I just sorted here on 24-hour volume, and I see we got Ethereum, Ripple, EOS. We hadn't looked at EOS for a little bit. So we can do Ripple as well. Let's look at Ripple because we just looked at that the other day. All right, so here's the count that we have on Ripple. I think I've got this up. I wanted to do it on a smaller time frame. I thought I had this. Here it is. No, that's not it. Well, let's just get a fresh chart on it. So bear with me a second. I get this up here. I think I had Ethereum over here. Oh, we can do Ethereum. Let's do Ethereum. Okay, so let's go. Again, I'm trying to get away from this anomaly here, because this is a distortion of typical trading behavior. It still may have a play here, so let's look here. So if we've got a low here and we're anticipating, where's the next swing? Right? You know, you want to keep going forward. So here's the last swing before we go up. We can go back one. Right? I would start going forward here. Now we've gone to and through. Now you've got this big spike, right? So are we going 100% of that move? Well, we could, right? But that's not one I would necessarily use. I would use this, looking for some reaction. Now, if we get to and through all of that, with that, again, the idea is not to be shorting up here. You're looking for a reaction. We get through all that, well, something else is going on. So again, this case, we know what the amount is. Let me just randomly, I'll just go back. It's going to give me anything. Here we go. All right, so this seems like it might be decent here. Okay, so we get a good low here. And we got sort of a double bottom. Let me open this up. So I'm down on a 15-minute. Let's open this up. All right, so here's our low. All right, so I'm going to go, well, let's use this low here. So I can go back one. All right, so here's my 100%. Is that a front run? Here's 200. Well, we could continue going forward here. but we run out of gas. All right, so I think just going back here, because I get technical pivots along the way here, this would pay, well, of course, here's the front run on the 100, here's the 150. That's significant. There's the 200, and just, you know, just common sense, just looking across, right? You can see here it was congestion before we broke down. So I would pay attention to this pivot right here. This would be significant. I'd start using this, measuring, going the other direction. So coming down, if that's a technical pivot that's important to the market, where's the first little squiggle that I've got to work with? It's this tiny little one right here. But if I want to get a dominant swing, right? So I can get a dominant pivot here. So here's the last swing, right? Here's the range. Here's the 100% range. Here's 200%, or in this case, the negative 100. All right, pretty good. All right, so we get close to that, so that's a reasonable target. So I've got a technical pivot down here to start working with, coming back the other way. So I'm going to grab this pivot here. Where's the last thing I've got to work with? The last little pivot is right here. If I open that up, you can see that. So it's this last pivot before we drive down. So you look here, get it right on there, pretty close, right? Front run on the target, maybe. If you think it's here, you want to start going forward, you start projecting forward. Well, now you're setting up bigger targets, but since I had a technical pivot here, I would pay attention to that. So coming here now, I've got this tiny little squiggle to hit right here that I can work with. It goes past it, so I can start using that. What do we get right here? All right, so here's the swing. Here's the projection. Here's the negative 100 projection, or taking this length of this swing and just doubling it down here. Front run on target, most likely. So now I'm going back the other way. So let's pull that back the other way. All right, so here's a pivot that's technical. Where's the well, that first little thing I've got to work with is just this last little squiggle here. All right, so you can see we get a reaction at the 100. If I want to go back to a bigger dominant swing, or even further, right, here's the swing. Here we double it. All right, front run, probably. You want to go this way? All right, see, the idea is to look for the dominant swing that preceded it. Now, if we're going forward, if it's a tiny little swing, right, if we get beyond this and you start using these, you can do the same thing. Right, we start projecting forward. So there's a little bit of a trial and error where you're trying to anticipate where am I going to get the next reaction. So if I see something like this, this tells me I've got a technical pivot up here. Right, so I would start working from this. Now I would work back the other direction. So now this is not something you would use just by itself, right? So you would work with your other indicators here. So if we were, I'm going to have to change the. So let's do this. I have to change the setup here, and I'm gonna go through this with you real quick. So I'm gonna use I'll go back to my measured move. Okay, so here's the pivot that we all know about here. So we went swing low, we went into the golden zone, we saw that reaction. So I have a technical pivot here. So with that, now let me change back to what I was using there. So I just want to show you it's not enough by itself, but if I saw something like that, yeah, I would start measuring with the other one. So let me highlight here and take that back. Go to template. I call it Wolf because that was the guy who taught it to me. Okay, so here I've got a technical pivot. So I'm going to go here, right? So I'm going to go, last little pivot I have is right here, right? You see that? And we go 100%, right? But if we think it's going to go further, we can go back to the last dominant swing that I have before. Well, you got a couple here. You have this one, but this is really the big one before we start to go. All right, so this swing, now we double it here. Right, you see what I've done? Here's the swing. Here's the, whoops, I've got the wrong one. Hang on a second. Did I get that wrong? Or did I save it wrong? I think I might have saved the colors wrong. Okay, so here's the 150. I meant to save that. I don't like these in green. So bear with me a second, and I'll show you how to do this. So I like these in this blue. I want the 50s in blue. I want the negative 50 in blue. I want the 100 in green. I must not change this here. So and then I want the 200 in green, the 300 in yellow. Okay, so let's save that. Okay, so here it is. So you can see here. So here's my little swing, right? Here's coming down. Here's the last dominant pivot here. Well, I only make the 150, so I can go this way. Right, so I can look at this one. Here's the first one going forward here. Well, what do we get? I get negative 200. So do you see what I've done? Here's the swing. Here's 100% of it, little reaction, ultimately gets 200%. pretty significant reaction. So I have another technical pivot here. So I can work with that. So now coming from that, back the other direction. All right, what do I have to work with? Well, the last little swing before it went down is right here. All right, so that annoys me. Here's the swing. Here's the swing high before it comes down. Here's 100%. Right, there's 200, almost makes 300. Right, so, but here's the reaction we're looking for. So if I think this is technical, again, it's not something to use by itself. I mean, day traders use it, but if you think this is the pivot here, and we're going to go down, well, you'd be projecting this way. Right, so maybe you thought, oh, here, coming here, this was some sort of a 50, or you're close enough to the 50, in between the 50 and the 618, you thought you had a technical pivot. This is another way to project. So here's the range you're looking for expanding down. Because to and through here, of course, you wouldn't know that. You were looking for, so if you were taking that here, you would have been stopped out if you were trading that short, right? So now we're going back the other direction. So I would work here. Pardon me, I would work here. Where's the last little pivot that I have? Here's the dominant. All right, here's the negative 100. We get through it, right? So you might go this way and say, going forward, was it this one? And there's a little bit of trial and error. Okay, I get the negative 200 damn near that's to the tick. So I know I have a technical pivot here. So now I'm going to apply the same thing going the other direction. So starting here, what's the first little squiggle that I have to work with? Right here. This is the first pivot before we start going down. Here's the 100. Well, if it's going to keep going, there's the next one. Right, front run on target, probably. Right, you could keep going this way. Right, just keep doubling it as we go, and we get all the way. Shit, this is right before the free fall. So here, remember, I'm on a 15-minute. So we're so far beyond that. You really would be projecting. I mean, you could use it in that fashion, projecting looking for something way down here. We almost make the 150. But when you have that kind of range, then you got to rethink it. Where do I get a pivot? So again, it's not necessarily something where what you're looking for are reaction points. So if I have a pivot down here, I'm going to start projecting up for whatever reason. We start to move away with it. I say, okay, well, where's that likely to go? Well, here's the pivot. Here's the last swing before it goes. Right? There's 100. Get a reaction to the tick. Here's 200. Well, pretty good, right? So just a little swing. So you can go forward as well. If we take out this swing, you can go forward, right? Continue projecting, looking for that expansion, right? Not the same here. So we get this one damn near to the tick. So if I think I've got a pivot here, I think the market's going to go down. Well, then I might work from this going the other direction. Where's the last little pivot I have to work with? You see it? All right, so here it is. All right, goes to the tick. Now, if you were trading that, it's not necessarily that you would start selling here. It's that you're looking for the next area to look for a potential place to be entering the market. So the 100 is the best one. So since I get this little swing here and ultimately we get the 100 here, now I want to work from this pivot. Okay, so from this pivot, if I open that up, here's the last little squiggle that I've got, the last little pivot before we go down. The first one is right here. Well, I guess you could make the case it's right here. So here's the last one before we go down, this little shelf before we turn and go red. Well, here's the 100, right? So you think, oh, I've got a technical pivot there. So from here, what do I have to work with? Well, not much, right? So from here, the only thing I've got is to go down here. Right. Well, that would have been, we don't get there. So your projection, you're not necessarily in a trade. You're just projecting, looking for a reaction. You don't get a reaction. We're going back the other way. Well, here's the pivot before we start. Well, what do I have to work with going back the other direction? Well, here's the pivot. I'm going to go up to the most recent one right here. We get to and through. So I'm going to go back. There's the dominant. Oops. 200%. Right. Here's the swing. All right, we blow through the 100, go up to the 200. We get a reaction. So here I'm going to start projecting now, coming down. Here's the next one. Right, from here, what do I have to work with? The only thing I have there is the last swing low, the swing low before we turn. All right, to and through, we get all the way down there. All right, so you think, no, I must have something technical here because I'm taking that tiny thing. Now you can continue to project forward using it that way, saying this range projected down. Here's the 100. Yeah, we get through it. Could use this. Just looking for these to double. So that it's useful when you're looking to identify the range of the market. Now I get a technical pivot down here. So I'm going to do the exact same thing coming back the other direction. So here's the low. I'm going to go to the first little pivot I have to work with, which is right here. Right, here's 100, 200. You get the idea. All right, let's just go over. Right, I would encourage you to apply that to crypto, apply it to FX is how it was taught to me. So let me just show you how to set your tool here. All right, so let me get that, and then we'll go to settings. All right, so you want so first we got to have the 100 and the 100, right? So those are going to be in white. Then we need the 50, and then the negative 100, and the negative 50. Right, then you can add the negative 200 and the negative 300 if you want as well. Do I have the negative 300? I want the negative 300. I want negative 300. All right, so there you have the negative 300. So here's the 100%. Here's the minus 50, minus 100. You could add the minus 150 as well. Often you'll see reaction. Let's do that. Let's get the minus 150 in there. Let's use minus 1.5. We'll put that in blue as well. Okay, so did I not get it? Hang on. Minus 1.5. Yeah, we got it. Okay, so and then we could get, yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've got the 100 minus 50. All right, that's the idea. So that's how you set that. So it's very useful. Just, let me, did I have, I thought I had the euro up here. I was going to show it to you in a currency. Thought I had the euro teed up here for you guys, but I may not. Yeah, no, I don't. Okay, all right. You guys get the idea. There's something to play with over the weekend. I'd encourage you to use it at these significant technical pivots. Here's the last update on Ripple, and looking a little saggy as well. But that's the idea here. Something to play with over the weekend. I hope you guys can get something out of that. It's very effective, and particularly on shorter term, 15-minute on FX. But it looks just as a helpful tool, not to build all of your trading around it, but another helpful tool when you're looking for areas where you're expecting a reaction. So the 100 and 200, very powerful. All right, guys, I'll wrap it there. You guys have a good week.